Hey NAI football fans, Corey Thorpe here with another edition of the NAIF Ball Podcast, powered by AdCraft USA, your custom apparel, merch, and uniform experts. Our friends at AdCraft have been with us for many years now. They've run web stores for us multiple times. These guys are NAI fans and family who are experts in the apparel and merchandise world. AdCraft allows you to take the hassle out of ordering. Let their knowledgeable design and customer service staff handle everything from hosting the store online, shipping the product, and helping your customers so you can get back to the game. Find them online at adcraftusa.com. All right, NAI football fans, this is Corey Thorpe back with another edition of the NAIF Ball Podcast, powered by AdCraft, custom apparel and merch. The GOATs since 1974 in apparel, merch, and uniform. If you need any of that, if you want to do a web store, we'll talk about that more later. You should look them up. Amazing. What else is amazing is the Mid-States Mideast. Just how amazing, we'll find out. But this is, Matt, this is a division that is, boy, in 1 year is going to look so radically different than it did last year. There's a lot going on in this division.
Yeah, a lot going on, a lot of congestion at the top and in the middle of this conference. A lot of good competition to go around. Talked about the Mid-South being super competitive last week, but man, it's hard not to have these guys in the conversation as well. They're up there.
Yeah, it really is, and they've always been difficult, and now it's just going to be for a different reason. So let's, I guess, before we begin, because there's going to be people who are coming in that don't know anything about the realignment that has gone on. In years past, the Mid-States Mideast has been what we have called the gauntlet. You have had 4 teams at the top that if you were going to win this division, you were going to have to go through Marion, St. Francis, Indiana Wesleyan, and Concordia, Ann Arbor. With the rejiggering of the Mid-States, they have moved St. Francis of Indiana and Marion over to the Midwest, and they have brought in a new member, the formerly D3 Defiance Yellow Jackets, 4-6 a year ago, 3-4 in the Heartland. And Matt, I'm just going to tell you, I don't have much of a frame of reference for D3, and I don't know how good 163rd out of 240 is. My brain only goes up to about 100 where we are. But I'm going to tell you, the 216th ranked defense doesn't sound that great.
That's a big old number that is kind of scary. And obviously, going up from the D3 level to NAI, competition takes form a bit differently. I think we are biased, but we would probably say the NAI is more competitive than D3 at this level. So I don't know. It's always nice to welcome in new schools and new teams into the fold, especially with some of the stuff we're seeing around the country with schools and athletic departments folding. I think it's good that we are still finding ways to expand and get people involved. But I don't know. I just don't know what to make of this team. I'll have to send a text over to my D3 buddy because I'm sure he'd have a better idea than I would.
Yeah, and to me, it's also harder because you look at the couple of D3 schools that have come over recently.
Mhm.
You had Thomas More, who came in from D3, and they were okay in the Mid-South, and then they decided to go D2, and AI was kind of a stepping stone for them. You had Iowa Wesleyan, who came in from D3, came in, was okay in the North Star, and then the entire school folded. Um, and then you've had um, Louisiana Christian coming in from the D3 ranks, and they've done pretty dang well for themselves in the
Mhm.
Sooner, getting a playoff berth this last year. And so I just don't know. I don't have a solid case study
Mhm.
for this move to be able to peg Defiance, um, in some sort of way. But let's take a look at what they've got coming back. leaving and returning here. I know that both says returning for those who are, on YouTube. My apologies. Obviously, words are hard. But the guys who are returning are Taiwan Roan, the returner, who also is a receiver, and Dominic Harris, the D lineman. And it's going to be a toughie here. You're losing a lot of pieces defensively between two first-teamers in Richard Pope IV on the D-line, Thomas Coltrane on your linebacking core, and then Vashon Palmer in your defensive secondary. Anytime you're going to lose a big leader at each level, that's going to be tough for your defense.
Absolutely. I think, too, going into the NAI, there's at least it's a bad thing because you want those position leaders in that place, but also you get to kind of turn the page as a team. So it's always kind of interesting. On the flip side of things, obviously, those are great players, but now you get to kind of start fresh in some of those position groups, or at least younger guys kind of leading the way on that. So a lot of pieces gone, but curious to see how it plays out for them.
Yeah, they're very much going to have to flip the page quickly because this team had a lot of senior leadership last year. They're bringing back literally no quarterback who played. All of their quarterbacks who played were seniors. They had a couple of wide receivers and running backs who had thrown a pass here or there, assuming that's a little bit of trickeration there. So I don't really count that. You return only a few running backs, but you do return almost all your wide receivers. But I don't know. You got to find someone to throw it.
Yeah, usually helps.
And then a minority of your defense, a minority of your linebackers, or a minority of your DBs, a majority of your D line. But again, majority is not terribly big. That could have been 3 returners and 2 leavers. I don't know what to make of Defiance. Are you going to get a team who is going to struggle for a year or two before they find their footing? Or are you going to find a team that's stepping up for a new challenge with some new players? Next up, we have 2 teams with new head coaches, starting with Madonna, the Crusaders. Matt, I didn't have to change the record from last year. They have been 0-11 for 2 consecutive years, and, we say a lot around here that for teams like this, there is nowhere to go but up. I can't think of another team where this applies more aptly than Madonna, who's been 0-22 in the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, obviously a new head coach in there makes sense. When you don't win a game for 2 seasons, it's kind of hard to justify keeping people around for that long. So I get it. Again, I feel like we start every episode off by saying this, and you've already said it, but my goodness, like you don't have any all conference players really coming back, but you also don't have any leaving. Well, you do have one leaving, Owen Spell. Obviously, that's kind of a big piece of it. But besides that, you're returning most of your guys, if not all of your guys. Now, granted, don't necessarily keep track of the portal all that well. The NAI, it's so weird compared to what you see at upper levels of college football. It's kind of hard to peg there, but you bring a good chunk of your team back, which is promising, but there's guys got to step up. It's just hard to imagine this team gets worse.
Well, record-wise, you literally can't do any worse.
Yeah.
I mean, you win one game, and they might start talking about building a statue of Brett Gaminsky. Now, here's the good news is that not only have you brought in a new head coach, but you've brought in a guy who's been at U-Pike under Corey Phipps. And if you're going to bring anyone in to run an offense, air raid is probably one of the most fun things you could run.
It's true.
And that allows you to easily sell to running backs, to wide receivers, to quarterbacks who want to play in such a system. I feel like you might be able to use that as a recruiting tool. Use simple concepts. It's a quick offense. It's a simple offense. Hard to defend, but but the concepts are simple as compared to some of your more pro style offenses, or heck, even the triple option. You got to know where your read keys are and all that good stuff. Not to say that it's not in the air raid, but the concepts are simplified.
It's a different type of read. It's not as intense of a read. It's only one guy having to make a read. Like it's much more simplified.
Which is good for a team who's not won a game in 2 years.
Yeah,
You
I'd
can
say
get
so.
some confidence underneath you. I mean, crap, you were in the 90s out of 95 in both offense and defense, and you return most of your defense. You can't get much worse on defense.
Yeah. So nowhere to go but up, man.
Yep. Next up, the Lawrence Tech Blue Devils, another team that has struggled to gain footing in the NAI since they created their team about 4 or 5 years ago. 70th in SP Plus, dropped one spot with losing about 13 spots on offense and one on defense. Drops you only one spot from 69th to 70. Got a new head coach as well. We talked about that for Madonna, but they're bringing in Scott Merchant, who's been a local high school guy. And, well, that might be helpful in recruiting. You know that area, and you're able to find the talent out of that area. And I mean, Lawrence Tech is right there in Ann Arbor. That might be a rich area to
Yeah.
recruit out of.
Yeah. Considering we just saw a team at the D1 level win from that city. Hey, not a bad spot to be in. Obviously, we'll talk about Concordia down the road, but they are also on the way out, which is something to mention for them too. They'll get kind of sole control of that area after this season. And having a guy that knows the lay of the land, like you said, for recruiting is huge. Being able to build a fence around your kind of community, especially with how competitive this conference is, having a consistent crop of guys that you can kind of pick from that you're already familiar with is going to be huge for Lawrence Tech going forward. I haven't quite been able to get the ball rolling the past couple seasons, but this is a team who we've seen kind of a steady improvement from the bottom of the barrel. So, they're kind of building their way up. They're winning some games. They're beating some bad opponents. They're even sticking their nose out against the Ave Marias of the world, like we saw last season in a close win there. And they're kind of hanging with some of these bigger teams. I think a new head coach will help. I think also the fact that you return a decent amount of your all conference talent is also huge. Those skill positions specifically is going to be big for them.
The good news there is that you do bring back your starting quarterback in Alex Osman and two guys in Jaden Rembert and Jalen Wallace that were over 1,000-yard receivers, plus a running back who went for 500 yards. You've got some tools there. As long as you can block it up for him, you stand a good chance of being able to get better offensively. Defensively is where I'm going to have questions between Dante Banton and Matt Plaga, who were good for 19 tackles for loss and 7 pass breakups. That's going to be some big shoes to fill. But one thing that I do want to call out, we don't call it the kickers a whole lot, Matt. My man, Vincent Robinson, 10 of 11, long of 44. And that one miss was blocked. My man didn't actually miss a kick. That's a good weapon.
That is a good weapon. And 44 out in the NAI, like that is a strong leg to have in your arsenal.
That's one of those that'll do balls.
Yeah, absolutely. Gotta love the special teamers. They deserve love
Absolutely.
too.
So, like we said, I mean, you do return almost all of your offense because you are returning your quarterback. You're returning most of your running back production. You're returning almost all your wide receivers. The question's going to be in that linebacker, that DB room. Who's going to step up? Because you've only got, 60, 70% of those guys coming back. You're going to have some snap gaps to fill there for Lawrence Tech. Next up is, we talk about triple and option football an awful lot around here, and there always seems to be one who likes to, have fun with option and RPO football, and MSFA Mideast is no different. It's going to be the Taylor Trojans. Aaron Mingo, the, I believe, Dort guy, is the head coach there. I think this is his third year now. Was not a banner year for him last year, unfortunately. Went down 9 spots overall, including 11 on offense and 12 on defense. Going down, took a couple of steps back with the wins. Was a 4-win team in 22, a 2-win team in 23. But this is a team that, honestly, you could see them taking a step forward this year.
I think so. And I think we also have to shout that every year this is a team that plays across the city against FCS Butler. Never an easy matchup for them. I always like seeing that game. It's fun that there's kind of a rivalry between levels there. But yeah, this is a Taylor team who we see be competitive in the past that really wasn't last year. And that's record wise, anyways, that's what it would show. But you look at some of these games that they lost last year, they were quite the opposite. I mean, you lose by 4 points to Lawrence Tech, you lose by only 2 scores to St. Francis at home. You lose by only 14 to a top 5 team in the country in Marion. This is a team with a style of play that can always be in it. And I think that's the nature of teams like Taylor who run these types of offenses, is that they slow teams down, and if you're able to build some momentum and play the time of possession game, you always have a chance. So this is a team you can't really always count out. Also, losing to a pretty solid Sienna Heights team by only 3 points last year. A lot of heartbreak for a Taylor team that otherwise felt like they were in a pretty decent spot.
Yeah, and this is a team that you can see. You can definitely foresee them getting better over time with what they want to run. Next year, you've got a linebacker who was good for 115 tackles. You bring back basically your leading tackler there is always a big one. You are going to have to replace, though, Drew Bagley, your H-back. Good for 140 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. There's some spots there that you're going to have to replace, especially in your running back room, where Drew Scally is going to be your big running back. You lose your top 2 backs in that room. And for a team that does not like to throw the ball a whole lot, you do return your quarterback. You do return a majority of your wide receivers. But that defense should be a whole lot better. You return almost all your D-line, all your linebackers, all your DBs. Defensively, you should be able to take a step forward.
Absolutely. And this is a tough football team. And I think you're going to see a lot of these coin flip results go the other way next year. Pretty confidently say that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a Taylor team that I am high on, but I also want to see prove it on the field, especially after their 2023 season. So
it's true.
With that, we'll step away and we'll hear a word from our friends at AdCraft.
So you want to create and sell custom merch for your team or business. That's exciting, but where do you begin? How much inventory should you order? How do you distribute orders? AdCraft has your answers. Streamline the way you offer custom merch by utilizing our risk-free web store service. We ship directly to each customer, and we have the fastest turnaround in the game. Raise funds for your team or get merch to your employees and patrons. Contact AdCraft today, and let's bring your merch to life.
And they are so good at doing that. Incredible merch, great guys, understands where you are as an NAIA team, works with you to make the best merch possible, takes care of all the dirty work in terms of setting up a web store, making sure that your fans are taken care of, and making sure that their amazing gear gets right to their doorstep. They take all of that on, and they do it for you, taking a little bit of your headache over doing that away. Give our guys at AdCraft a call. So we've got our top 3 in the MSFA Mideast, all 3 being over 500, starting with Sienna Heights, 6-4, 4-3, actually dropped a good bit in SP Plus last year, because while they went up 38 spots on offense, they dropped 25 spots on defense. This was a team in 22 who had an amazing defense and a very, very pedestrian offense. You can see some growth.
Pedestrian's a bit generous, but yeah.
You can definitely see the growth, though, getting up
Absolutely.
to 54th. And, Matt, to me, that speaks a lot to the fact that you have Ethan LaPresta being a first-team all-conference guy, along with Walter Bauman on your offensive line.
Absolutely. Yeah, this was an offensive unit that was pretty bad. They were pretty hard to watch. Their defense was carrying them, dragging them along through most of the season. But we saw a bit more of a balanced team last year. And this was a team, I think going into last season, I mean, we were talking about being right there. They could figure out the offense. Now they're right there again if they can just, climb the ladder a little bit as a balanced team. I don't mind them dropping as many spots on defense SP plus because it feels like there is more rhythm. Your games probably aren't as chaotic in that fashion when your team is so one-sided. There's a lot to build off there, and not to mention, the running back and O line being first conference is great, but you also bring back Clark Hamilton and Shamar Askin, who are huge pieces of a very good Sienna Heights defense.
Yeah, you're talking about the 11 pass breakups between the two of them, 3 picks, a forced fumble. You are going to have to figure out what you're going to do on your defensive line with Antonio Simley leaving there. He was good for 7.5 sacks, along with Eric Williams. But, I mean, the good news is you're bringing back most of everything on both sides of the football. You continue to get better, and you go if you have a really good season this year and outpace what people think you are, which is an occasional nuisance team. If you're able to outpace that and take out a lot of your Midwest opponents, then we're going into 25 talking about you challenging for division titles and playoff spots.
Absolutely. And that's a position we haven't seen this team in very much since we started talking about them. It's fun to see the climb of this program, and we've spoke highly of them in the past couple of years, but man, really feels like they could be piecing something together in 2024.
And the reason we talk about 2025 so much is the unfortunate next slide, and that is Concordia.
Yeah.
It breaks my heart every time that I hear about this. Concordia is they're not closing as a school, but they're shutting down their athletics department. And you hate that for a team who was really starting to get over the hump in baseball, for a team who was starting to make some noise on the basketball court, a team who had multiple playoff runs in football. And they're just they're going to be done. And you talk about Lawrence Tech and sharing that city, and I know, golly, I do not envy for 1 second their coaching staff, because you're going to have to figure out how to keep this team focused, because if I'm a player on this team, especially if I'm an underclassman, I'm trying to figure out where I'm going, what I'm doing with my career. But that's not what I need to be focusing on as an underclassman. I need to be focused on one last run and making it all that we can be, and putting my talents on film so that come December and January, when my film goes up and people start trying to see who they can take off of this roster, that I shine.
Mm-hmm. And they're in such a unique spot, because the conversations being had around this team right now, I can only imagine, are extremely open, more open than you would imagine it to be when talking about transferring, when talking about next steps, when talking about down the road, when talking about the future. But I think there is something to be said for how much this team returns. And the fact that people found this out on this team, it didn't jump ship right away, kind of proves to me that they want to give it one last run with everybody locked in. And you look at all the pieces they return, they are certainly in a position to get something done.
The big one there is Seeger DeGainer. Seeger DeGainer on paper is a senior. He's coming back for one more run. Colby Comsher is coming back for one more run. I think David Cagle is as well as in Dowling. The only one who's not is Casey Roush, who kind of hurts a little bit. The punting linebacker there was so good at both positions for so many years. But yeah, you look at DeGainer. That is the big piece there. I think once he came back, it was easier for everyone else to come back. So you're looking at a guy who had 15 touchdown catches, almost 900 yards receiving, and who was averaging 32.6 yards per kick return. That's a guy who's going to be leading your squad there. And we look at the outlook, and you're bringing back your quarterback in Gavin Brooks. You're bringing back most of everything else, most of your D-line, most of your wide receivers, most of your running backs, rather, most of your wide receivers. Look, there's no we'll get them next year. It's win or go home.
Yeah, quite literally. Do or die. I mean, this is a team that has been in the picture for the past few years and has been so competitive. Like, they're looking at this season like you're at the edge of the cliff. You might as well give it your best shot. I am very confident in this team and their coaching staff with what they have going on, that they're going to be able to focus and get things done. And I'm excited to see. I know you never want to get overly emotional playing football, but there's going to be a lot of emotion around this team for an entire season. And I'm excited to see how they channel that and use that to their benefit, because I think if there's a program that can do that, it is Concordia.
Yeah. I don't know. This one seems to hurt a little bit more than some of the others. I mean, we've looked at presentation before. We've looked at Cincinnati Christian, I think, was my first one that I had. I think this one being a perennial playoff contender, this one hurts the most for me.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
And so we've talked about the gauntlet. We've talked about St. Francis being gone. We've talked about Marion being gone. We've talked about Concordia being on one last run. This is why we keep saying that 25 is going to be really weird.
Very strange.
Because if you're Indiana Wesleyan, you're almost like that scene in Fresh Prince where he's kind of looking around the room. And
he's in the empty living room, but he's looking around.
Right. The court did everybody go?
Yeah.
I mean, and so you've gone from having to scratch and claw your way through the gauntlet, and you're looking around at 2025, and not that everyone else isn't going to be a gauntlet, and not that you aren't going to have to play Marion and St. Francis, but determining your divisional status, which is what gets you into the playoffs, gets a little easier.
It's like an animal that's been in captivity their whole life in a zoo, and you set them in the wild, and they don't want to leave whatever space they were used to in their enclosure. They just don't know what to do. And this is a team that we don't really know I at least don't really know what to do with, because on paper, this has been a fantastic team the past few seasons, but we have seen them inch and claw their way and get close and beat these good teams. And they are just never quite taking that step that we expect them to.
And this is going to be a weird season. I mean, you lose. They were 6th in 2022. Now they're 17th. They do go up 16 spots on offense. They had for where they were, a ridiculously bad offense a couple seasons ago. But they also had a ridiculously good defense, the best in the NAI 2 seasons ago. And now they fall back to a little bit of parity. That's not the worst thing in the world.
No.
And you've got good pieces coming back between Tidwell and Tristan Hayes, and your D line is going to be great with Williams and Cheese. You've got two all-conference first-teamers at linebacker with Mosher and Bays, but then you turn the page and you see that you're losing Stokes and Williams.
Yeah.
And you're like,
two humongous pieces of your offense the past few years.
yeah. And yes, quarterbacks come and go. Yes, running backs come and go. But Stokes was the one who got this team and took it to that next level.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's, I don't know what to think of Indiana Wesleyan.
Yeah, they're in a very weird spot. I don't want to say that they're in a transitional phase, but with all the other transitioning and changes in this conference, it's almost fitting that they're kind of up in the air because, like, who even knows what's going to happen in this half of the conference this year? Like, at this point, because I think Indiana Wesleyan, while they have proven that they are the top of this division and will be so until proven otherwise, there's a lot of weird stuff going on behind them and across on the other side of the conference. So,
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that is definitely going for IWU in their favor is that this is year 2 for Andrew Rohde.
absolutely.
And
Mm-hmm.
your year 2 coaches, that's when you see the most growth. And so there's a part of me that looks at the fact that you're returning a minority of your offense, you know, where you're going to have to replace your quarterback, where you're going to have to replace your running back. That might not be the worst thing, because now
Mm-hmm.
your coach can really put his system into play. And we know that Rohde is an offensive guy coming from Morningside and before that Concordia Ann Arbor. He's a guy who likes a running quarterback. We've seen that. So maybe this is his chance to put his stamp on the offense.
I think so. And I think so too, with how much you return on the defense. This could look very similar to Indiana Wesleyan teams in the past, but with a boosted offense. You know, you get that defense with all the pieces coming back into that top 10, top 5 picture. And you're looking at a really good football team. We might not know the guys who are going to be starting on the offensive side of the ball right away, at least a lot of those skill guys. But Rhodey's a guy who can get it done, and we've seen him get it done at the offensive coordinator level. And I think with year 2, like, this is, they still got a lot of things going for them. I feel like I kind of trashed on them a bit hard earlier. It's not to say they're not a good program, but they are. It's just different. It feels different. It's in a weird spot, in a weird time, in a weird conference.
Yeah, this is, I think, I want to say this is either year 5 or year 6 for Indiana Wesleyan. I think that's why it feels weird.
Yeah.
Because this is kind of, and you've already gone through one head coach. Now, granted, that one guy got hired on as a position coach at a Power 5 school.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm not going to fault a guy, but you've been through that, and before you got through your first real recruiting cycle of 4 years, and so you've had a little bit of turnover, and now it's time to see whether all of that talk that we've done for the last several years of look at Indiana Wesleyan, look at their facilities, look at their institutional support. This is the year, I think, with some divisional obstacles removed, that it's going to be a put up or shut up year for Indiana Wesleyan. Either you emerge victorious and you grand view the rest of this conference, or we're going to have a really interesting 2025 preview.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So then, who are we picking? I'll go first. There's too much going on in Indiana Wesleyan to not pick them. I'm gonna go with that safe pick. Now, I do though think, in a very traditional sense of a dark horse, not our typical sense of a dark horse, but in a traditional dark horse sense, it would not at all surprise me to see Concordia coming together, feeling like they're playing with house money, and absolutely trash every other team and Hollywood this thing up, hoist a red banner as they go out. We've seen it a couple times. this year where teams have made the playoffs as their school was closing. This could be that. We could see the Hollywood story.
We definitely could see the Hollywood story. And I think we're going to, because God dang it, I am picking Concordia and Harvard to win this conference. I picked them last year, but all this wasn't going on. So I'm going to never wrong just early this like I usually do with all of my picks. I'm going with Concordia, excuse me. They're playing with house money. This team is already really good on paper. You add everything emotionally and everything else that's going on with this team. I think we're going to have a movie season, Netflix special, if you will, with this Concordia team. I'm going to go a bit off the deep end for my dark horse. Go to Florence Tech. Obviously, this is a new head coach, local guy, local high school head coach, which can kind of be worrisome for some colleges. I'm not super concerned, especially with the lofty ceiling that this program has, considering we haven't seen them really reach the peak of anything yet. There's still a lot of space in the air as to what they can accomplish. And I think with Concordia kind of leaving your recruiting grounds, there's a lot of young guys that could play an impact right away. They have a lot of pieces coming back. I think this is a team that is going to surprise some people. Taylor also makes a lot of sense, but I feel like how close they play people, it's not as much of a surprise. And when I think dark horse, in my opinion, I think more of a surprise. It's why I want to go with Lawrence Tech here. Excited to see what they do with the new head coach and kind of a new vibe to them. It's going to be exciting.
Well, Matt, it's time for us to make some people mad.
Oh, numbers.
Numbers.
Love those.
Numbers are going to upset some people today, and that's okay. When we first started the podcast, there was no question that the Mid-States Mideast was the absolute single best division in the NAIA. The amount of firepower you had with the St. Francis team, who was coming off of back-to-back national championships, the Marion team, who was incredible, an Indiana Wesleyan team who was just starting out, and a Concordia team who was a constant in the playoffs, there was no question that the Mid-States Mideast was the best division. That is not the way it is anymore, folks. I really hate to tell you, they clock in on average at number 6 on average SP+. And I don't feel good about revealing this information. Like, I want to think the Mid-States is phenomenal, but without St. Francis and Marion in there, it's not great. And it gets even worse when you go to standard deviation, where you're number 8.
Oh, goodness.
I started putting together these numbers. I'm like, oh, this is not going to turn out well. I did not expect 27. And so that means that, like, overall, you're 8th so far.
Not a spot I thought we'd ever talk about this conference in.
No, it's not.
This division, I should say.
Yeah.
But
I mean, last year I made people mad by saying that the Midwest was clearly a better division than the Mideast. I think this year it's clear that the Midwest is definitely better than the Mideast, especially with having Marion and St. Francis. But yeah, that one. Yeah, you could have blown me.
I don't see any Hollywood magic on the Midwest side, okay? So I'm hanging my hat on that for this conference.
Yeah, you could have blown me over with a feather when I started doing the math, and I'm like sitting here going, "Oh, this is not great. This is not the numbers that I was expecting."
Not good for narratives.
Not great.
Narrative ball person in myself, not a fan of that.
Yeah. So, and we got into this on our Discord actually a few days ago, Matt. We were talking about it with some Mideast folks, especially some of the Marion folks. It takes a while to break tendency there to think about it, but there are unfortunately better divisions now in this league.
Yep.
And now that I've burst everyone's bubble, That's it for another NAIA F-Ball podcast. Join us next week as we talk about the Midwest. We actually get to talk about Marion and St. Francis, and we talk about the gauntlet having changed sides now, with St. Francis of Illinois having done really good work in the last few years, with an Olivet Nazarene team that's got a new head coach, with a St. X team that is a constant playoff contender. And then you add in Marion and St. Francis of Indiana.
Yeah.
The gauntlet has changed sides, I think, from one side of the division to the other. And we'll talk about that. That's going to be an interesting conversation. But, interesting conversations. You heard me reference the Discord. If you are one of our patrons, even if you're not, you can come into the Discord. Hit me up for a link. I'll make sure that happens. But I make sure that all of our patrons have access to that Discord, where we can talk NAI football and other sports. But, it's a little bit more unlike Twitter, where it's just like flinging spaghetti at a wall. Discord feels like a little bit more laid back, sitting around drinking coffee kind of conversation.
I'd agree.
So
I'd agree with that.
If you would like to talk NAI football in that sort of frame, hit me up. I'll get you a link, or just become a patron. I'll send you a link. But our patrons are as follows: DSU Cone, Bob Boone, Roger Meyer, Jeremy Vobble, Fred Christensen, Jerry Quickle, Ace Wellen, Brett, Marty Seabolt, Nick Ryan, Hayden Frigno, Kyle Gregory, Tyler Pierce, Justin Hoffman, Steve Speakman, Brian Shake, Julianne Shager, Nate Soapbeer, Stephen Cutler, Julie Lout, Dale Norton, Nathan Moore, Dylan Gonzalez, Ryan, Jason Crawford, Dustin Wilkie, Charles A. Flowers, Todd Nick, Sean Chamberlain, Debbie, Zach, Lance, and Josue Trujillo. Matt, we haven't really gotten a whole bunch of angry DMs, over our takes so far. I wonder if I'm going to get any angry DMs over this one.
I'm sure at some point we'll get some. If we don't get any, I don't think we're doing our job. So we might need to try a bit harder.
That is true. I mean, we want to be thought provoking. We don't want to be hot take.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
I like that.
I don't want to be hot take. I want to be thought provoking. I want to present a fair, balanced view that people go, I don't know that I fully agree with you, but I can see where you're coming from.
You want to do that at least. I like causing problems. That's what I bring to the table. So I need to do a better job, is what it sounds like.
Causing problems?
Yes.
That's okay. This is why we work well together. But
yeah.
Join us for another edition next week. Going to go through the Midwest. Can't wait. Going to be a great time. And until then, we will see y'all on the Twitter feed. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the NAIF Ball Podcast, powered by AdCraft USA. Be sure to contact them for all your custom apparel, merch, and uniform needs. Thanks also to our newest sponsor, Telemetry Sports. If you enjoyed the show, subscribe to the podcast and to our YouTube channel, and leave us a review if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. As always, if you'd like to support what we do, head over to patreon.com/NAIAFball and become a patron. We can't do what we do without our sponsors and listeners like you.